So I'm here today with Sergeant Adam Doc Hartswick. And Adam, I am so honored to have you here and to have you sharing your story and your experiences as a warrior. You know, a few years ago, I attended a conference with my husband that was a conference about moral injury or PTSD. And one of the speakers quoted Edward Tick, who said, "What every soldier needs most when returning home from war is a community to whom their experience matters." And that comment struck me. It stuck with me. Adam and I have said it so many times to so many different people. And it's a place I actually feel like we are not doing a good job in our country of creating that community to whom the experience of our warriors matters. And I'm thrilled to be part of that community today. So I'm so glad that you're here. And I feel really honored that more people are going to get to hear your story.
Thank you for having me. It's certainly important for those of us willing to share our stories to do so.
Yeah, and I think it's a brave thing because those stories are tender. And again, we've gotten away from, I think, there being just more understanding in our country. You know, I think about World War II, World War I. I mean, everybody was touched. Someone knew somebody. If not in your own home, you had family, right? Or someone or friends going overseas. Everybody was affected by it. And now, as the percentage decreases of how many of Americans are serving, you know, in the military versus how many people, you know, just aren't affected by it anymore, it feels like we've just gotten away from really wrapping our arms around our warriors and understanding them. So I really appreciate that you are bringing more understanding to the experience.
Absolutely. I think that more of us need to become not just warriors. We're already that. We need to be warrior poets, and not in the classical sense per se, but at least being willing to be storytellers. Because otherwise an actor is going to do it for you someday, you know? And it's like that. I mean, honestly, many of the actors that I've met that tell the stories of warriors, like I had the fortunate opportunity to meet 8 of the actors from the show Band of Brothers back in May. And all of those men were very reverent about the men that they portrayed. And I think in their own way that those actors are heroes for that. And I told them that because I truly do believe that in their own way they are. And I think that veterans ourselves need to get to that level where we are sharing our own stories so that other people don't do it for us, you know, because no one else is going to tell it the way that we do.
I definitely have some follow-up questions for you about that, but I'd like to go ahead and share the story first. And there's multiple stories. Before getting into one of the most significant days that you and I have talked about, which is May 14th, can you first share a little bit too, just about what called you into the military? Why did you want to serve and be a warrior?
So I come from a military family. So going all the way back on both sides of my family, we had people serving in the Revolution, but within the last 100 years, essentially, my great-grandfather was a medic in World War I. Both my grandfathers served in World War II on my mom's side and my dad's side. And then my dad joined in 1979 and served a total of 37 years with 14 years active duty and the rest of that reserve time. So I grew up immersed in it and was always raised to be a warrior in one way or another. And basically before 9/11, I was going to serve in the military. And in my mind, even as a kindergartner, I knew I was going to serve in the military in one way, shape, or form. But then when 9/11 happened, I was like, oh, I need to actually be a warrior. You know, I need to protect my country. And because I was in 5th grade when it happened. So I waited basically my entire, you know, adolescent, teenage years preparing myself to serve in combat and like wanting to wrestle, wanting to do martial arts, wanting to shoot, all that stuff. So I was always at least mentally preparing myself to join.
I noticed you said mentally preparing yourself. Do you think having, dreamed about serving in the military for so long before you got there, do you think, or how prepared were you emotionally for what you were going to experience overseas?
I mean, I don't think anything can truly prepare you for it, but I certainly found myself more resilient than most people that I interacted with, simply because many people lost hope or freaked out before I did in many situations that I had been in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and just in general military life and training or whatever. I certainly would be annoyed, but I also would just shut my mouth and get the job done, regardless of what was happening around me. And I do think that my life before the military, and in a sense, the traumas I experienced throughout my life before the military, gave me some sense of resilience that may have been more than the average person that joins.
Mm. Well, that resilience certainly served you. So let me go ahead and ask you about, obviously, I know some of this story from you and my husband, been connected. I've heard the story through my husband, and I'm honored to hear it again directly from you. So why don't you tell us about May 14th, 2013?
So May 14th, 2013, I was on my second deployment, and my first deployment to Afghanistan, but in my second deployment overall, I had served in Iraq in 2011. So, but this deployment was different in that it was certainly more kinetic than Iraq was for me. Like, Iraq was still a war zone, still a combat zone, and I served in a combat unit doing combat patrols, training the Iraqi police, the Iraqi military, in Iraq. So I had experience as being a medic already. Mm-hmm. So when I was selected to be the senior medic for Alpha Company 341 Infantry, I was the most qualified for a reason. Mm-hmm. Now, May 14th, 2013 comes around. We're about 5 months into our deployment, and I am serving in a tower doing internal security. We share a compound, we share our outpost with Afghan National Army. So we have our own American compound where only Americans and NATO are allowed, and then external compound is Afghans, and we have a guard tower watching them to ensure there's no friendly fire or green on blue incidents that were common at the time. And fortunately, the Afghans we served with all were good guys, and never had a problem with them. But on May 14th, I was in the tower. I had my buddy next to me who could serve in my place, so I could still do my medic job. And
at this point, Adam, you mentioned being promoted to the senior medic. So you had already served as a platoon medic in Iraq, is that right? You'd already earned the title of doc. Can you also share, because that's something you've said to me before that I didn't realize was something you earned. I thought every medic was called doc.
Yes. So yeah, for the most part, because most medics are good, you are called doc. And it is something that is sacred and is earned. And any medic worth their salt should be doing their best to be called doc. If somebody calls you medic, or they call you by your last name, or they call you by your rank, it's sort of an insult to your pride. So even if you're a senior non-commissioned officer and you served as a medic, or at least the people around you knew you were the medic, most people will still call you doc. Because I mean, even my first senior medic, when I was a platoon medic, he was a staff sergeant, and everybody called him doc. And like even they would even lower enlisted would stand at parade rest for him and still call him doc. So it's like, it's such a sacred thing to be called doc as a medic. And it is certainly earned through tests of loyalty. And I think a poignant story is when I served as a platoon medic for the first time. I was new to the platoon, and the platoon sergeant was angry about something. And I think it was a test for me more than anything else, but he called the entire platoon over and he said, "White platoon, get down, and everyone drop, everyone fucking drop." and we all gotten, all the platoon had gotten in push-up position, and I was on the far side of the bay, and I sprinted over and dove into the platoon position, and I was in line with all the other soldiers, all the other scouts, and he was like, "No, Doc, you get in front right now. You were the last one here." And it was like he was showing the platoon that I was one of them. And like he had me smoked in front of everybody while everybody else was doing push-ups then. And it's like from then on, everybody called me Doc in that platoon. And it was like I could see what he was doing even in that moment. And so it is a sacred thing to be called Doc as a medic. And I remember the first time my ex-girlfriend visited me at Fort Bliss, basically no one had called me Adam or even Hartswick in the longest time, and everybody was calling me Doc. And she said it's such a cute thing that everyone's calling you Doc, and it was just such a strange thing to hear that, because like I had, for a year basically everyone called me Doc, and it almost like my name and my identity had shifted to that persona.
Yeah. Oh, as you said that, it also made me want to know, and then we'll get back to you being in the tower. What was it that called you to being a medic? Because there's obviously so many different roles you can take. And what was it specifically about being a medic that drew you in?
So I originally enlisted as infantry. I did delayed entry, and I signed up to be airborne infantry because everyone else basically was infantry in my family except for my great grandfather, who was a medic. And my dad sat me down, and once I got my EMT in my senior year of high school, he's like, "Hey, you really should be a medic. There's plenty of infantry, and you'll still get to serve in the infantry, but you'll be treated just a little bit better. Even if it's 1% better, if you're a good medic, your infantry brothers will make sure that you're comfortable, and even if it's a little bit more than they are. If everyone's sleeping on the ground, you're going to get to sleep on a cot." And like, I didn't care about that. But like, there was something about like, oh, well, I can save more lives as I can help more people. I can be that helper and that protector that I wanted to be as a medic, rather than, and of course you do that as an infantryman too. But like, it was just, I think as soon as I heard that idea, it just sparked something in me that was like, okay, yeah, being a medic is more meaningful. And besides, my dad and my grandfathers had already like really done all the infantry stuff they could for the Hartswick family, so it was like, maybe it's time for me to make my own path in life and carve out being something else. So yeah, like my dad was President's 100. He was a sniper. He was an airborne ranger. So he had like done the most infantry stuff you could do. And I was like, you know what? Let me be the best medic I can be and do the most medic stuff I could do instead. So it made more sense to me to be my own man in a sense. And while I was still serving in the military, do my own thing in a sense.
Yeah. That's interesting too, to think about how the medics get a little bit better treatment, maybe because the medic's taking care of everybody. So it sounds like that's the way the infantry or the platoon takes care of the medic. And that's a really cool, I guess, way to think of the brotherhood.
Right. And like, when you're a medic in the platoon, you are only responsible to the platoon sergeant. Like you are only accountable to the platoon sergeant. And then when you're upgraded to a company medic, when you're the senior medic, you're only accountable to the first sergeant and the commander. Like, any medical calls are made by you. And now obviously the senior NCOs in the company, you still respect the chain of command, but you are the senior medic for a reason. Like, you have the most experience working in the leadership, and even though I was a dumb 22-year-old kid put in a leadership position, I still had more experience than the other medics under me. And that didn't mean that I bossed them around. It didn't mean that but I was selected as senior medic for a reason, and you have to realize as a medic that like, when it's a medical matter, you must have the balls to make those decisions, and be direct with people who are questioning your actions. And I don't know, there was one time there was a staff sergeant hovering over me in my platoon when I was a platoon medic, when I was giving an IV to somebody, and he's like, "Oh, doc, don't mess it up, or don't do that." And I was like, and the first sergeant was nearby too, watching me do this, and I knew what to do. But this guy, I was like, "Do you want me to do the IV, or do you want me to give you a play-by-play, Sergeant?" And the first sergeant like looked at him and then looked at me and then told him to get out of there. I was like, it was this really cool moment where I was like, I think I was a PFC, and I told off an E6, a staff sergeant essentially, and like the first sergeant was on my side, and it was the coolest thing. Like, and it was like, oh wow, I can be a smartass still and get away with it sometimes in the right setting,
Yeah, because you know your shit.
Right. So like if you are doc and you have earned your place and you show your professionalism and your expertise, it won't be questioned by good leadership. And I never really had a problem with that other than that one time, you know what I mean? Because otherwise I displayed my professionalism and my expertise. Yeah.
So you had earned the title of doc. You were company senior medic at this point. And so you were in charge really of all the other medics, right? And like you said, only reporting, who were your two people you report to as senior medic?
Basically the company commander and the company first sergeant. So
okay.
the highest officer and the highest enlisted man in the company.
Okay. So that was your position on May 14th. And then you were in the tower. And so then what happened?
So yeah, essentially, just a little bit more about being the senior medic. In our infantry company, we were shorthanded a little bit, so I actually had like 6 hats that I wore. I ran the radio in our tactical operations center, the quote command center. I also ran a camera, it's called a raid camera. It's a big tower that watches our perimeter and monitors patterns of life. I was the senior medic doing sick call, meaning like I was taking care of sick people. And then I also had the internal security job as well. And like anytime there was an important meeting or anything like that where they needed extra security for something like a key leader engagement, like we were meeting with locals who could potentially threaten the commander or the first sergeant's life, while they were obviously experienced warriors themselves, they always picked me because I was the most experienced enlisted soldier in the headquarters, or lower enlisted soldier in the headquarters platoon. So like I was always the one that carried the rifle. I was always the one that stayed in the tower longer. They picked me because I was an expert marksman. I had a warrior mentality, and I displayed it regularly. So it was always kind of an honor anytime first sergeant would ask me to be security for something, because I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. He believes in me, Yeah. So anyway, on May 14th, I'm in this tower, and we get a call over the radio that our second platoon, who is out on a foot patrol through a village called Kilewal, is getting ambushed. And the person on the radio is the radio operator in the talk at the time, and he sounds terrified. And he's shaking, and I could tell that he was almost on the verge of tears because it was so bad. So I stand up, I take a tactical pause, and I grab my rifle, and then my buddy says, "Doc, go do what you have to do." And so I get out of the tower, I immediately put my kit on, meaning my plate carrier vest, my armor, my body armor, and my helmet, and I go to the talk, and the commander's there, and he's like even freaking out. And I'm like, "Sir, where are the casualties going? Where are they going? Are they coming here, or are they going somewhere else?" And like he hesitates. He's like, And I was like, "Are they coming here, or are they going somewhere else?" And he's like, "They're going somewhere else. They're not coming here." And so I was like, "Okay, I'm leaving. See ya." And I left. And like, without any direction, I was like, "Okay, I have to get on the QRF, or excuse me, the Quick Reaction Force, our company backup for the platoon that's going out, and it's first platoon on company QRF." So I grab my aid bag, and I see the first platoon sergeant. I was like, "Hey, I'm going with you," without giving him a choice in it. And he's like, "Well, you better hurry up." And so I grab my bag, I make sure I have my vest, everything like that, and I jump on a truck. And I'm like, "Oh man."
And can I ask you, Adam, up to this point in your service, had you experienced anything like this before, where it was, I mean, I'm sure something similar, but where there were significant casualties happening on the field that you were rushing to go support. Had you experienced that yet?
Not exactly. There was a couple things that happened here and there in like Iraq and like certainly earlier in Afghanistan. There was a couple strange things that happened, but this did feel different. Like this did feel worse. To the point that like my instincts and my gut was telling me like they need me out there. Like if it's bad enough that they have to call for, like, essentially nothing had ever happened before where they needed to call for QRF,
Okay.
the quick reaction force.
Okay.
There had certainly been other things that happened where like I helped and did my job, and there were certainly incidents that had happened before that, but for the most part, yeah, this was bad. Like, because when QRF is called, it means like they are pinned down. There is something bad happening, something very bad happening.
Okay.
So yeah, like all of my spidey senses, so to speak, were tingling. And so I knew this was severe, and like I knew I needed to take the initiative to get on that truck and get out there. So like when I was on the truck, I actually realized like nobody told me to do this. Like I was on my own, and I was like, oh no, if I die out there, they're gonna lose track of me. So I was like, please call the talk right now and tell them that Doc Hartswick is leaving the outpost. And they're like, oh shit, yeah. And so they like get on they're like, hey, Doc Hartswick's going out with QRF, and so I was like, okay, at least it's on the record somewhere. If
They
I
know where
die,
you are.
they know my body's out there somewhere.
Wow. And
And
in that moment, were you feeling afraid? Were you feeling fearful of death, or was it really hitting you? Or was it just like this quick thought for accountability? And then you just like, what was really going on in your mind at that time?
it was, I don't think I certainly wasn't scared of dying at that point. Um, but we had been around death and killing enough in that deployment that like there was the possibility there. And it was more for accountability's sake more than anything else. Like, because accountability is key in everything we do, and that's relevant to the story later even. So yeah, it was more just for accountability's sake.
And you were just focused on getting there and helping how you could.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, wow. Okay. Okay.
So
So you were heading towards the battlefield.
yeah, so we essentially we went to this there's various Afghan National Army, which is ANA, or Afghan Local Police, ALP, that have set up checkpoints, like little bases around the area, and we're going to stage or like amass our forces at a checkpoint. And I can't remember whether it was army or police, but it was an Afghan checkpoint out there. And we all got off the trucks, and like nobody was moving, but for some reason our striker was ready to go. Like our guys unloaded, and I saw some guys going out, and I was like, okay, I'm going with them. So I just jumped in this single file line of guys moving out to where the X was, where the incident was. We call it the X. Okay. And so this whole time, like everyone's sprinting in this group, and I'm like, hey guys, like, I had to be the doc in this moment. I was like, hey guys, don't wear yourself out. We need to be fresh for our brothers. Because like everybody's like sprinting to get there. I'm like, hey guys, chill. Like we need to do an airborne shuffle to get there. We can't sprint. What airborne shuffle means, like a jog, because we're all wearing like at least 100 pounds of gear. Our machine gunners carrying like over 100 pounds of gear. Everybody has something shitty that they're lugging, and it's like, no, don't sprint. Like we're gonna get there when we get there, and we're gonna be able to help when we get there. And we need to be fresh. So essentially we get on the X, and that's when I start to notice that there is something wrong. So there's craters in the ground, and then I start to see chunks of meat. And these chunks of meat have our camouflage on them. So multicam fatigues, the multi-camouflage pattern that we used on these chunks of human meat. Because when you're dealing with explosives, there's not much left of them. And we don't know how many are gone at this point, but I see one mainly intact person that is very dead, but mostly intact. out maybe 25 meters from where I'm standing in front of me. So, like a quarter of a football field. And I'm like, okay, so where is Taus? Where is the platoon medic, Cody Taus? And while we're out there, I'm like, hey, where the hell is he? Like, accountability is everything we do in the military. Where the hell is he? And nobody can tell me where he is. And I was like, okay, hold on, where is Taus? And then finally somebody grabs me by the vest and puts his helmet on mine and looks me in the eyes. And he says, Doc, Cody is gone. And I was like, oh, oh. And yeah, I knew that now I'm the only medic out here. Like, and it's a good thing that I made the decision I did. Because first platoon, of course, had a medic that came out with a QRF, but when my soldier is missing, it is my job as the senior medic to find him, or at least replace him if he's gone. And so I was not going to put another medic, another one of my soldiers in danger when it was my responsibility to do that, to pick up the slack. Because that's something that happened throughout the entire deployment, is like, when one of my guys is sick or tired, it is my responsibility to take their place on the mission or the patrol that they're going on. And I did that all the time. And now, this is my symbolic and my responsibility, so I was not going to let somebody else take my place. And so I'm on this X where the incident happened, and I'm freaking out now that my soldier is dead. My friend is dead. My brother is dead. And it's funny, Taus and I got in little spats more than anybody else. Because like when you're a senior medic at 22, your subordinates are 19 and 20 and maybe 21. So they're your little brothers. And like, we all bickered, we all fought, but at the end of the day, they were my brothers. But like, I was good friends with the EOD team, the bomb squad, explosive ordnance disposal. And the team leader, his name was Sergeant First Class Jeff Baker, and anybody that knows what that rank is knows that it's a senior rank, a senior non-commissioned officer's rank. And you refer to them as sergeant at all times, except with Jeff. Jeff insisted that you call him by his first name if he respected and liked you. And he always called me Adam, and he insisted that I call him Jeff. And all of a sudden, in this bleak moment for me, he comes up behind me and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, Adam, don't worry, we're going to get our brothers out of here. And just like, he was a saint in that moment, just an angel. And anybody that knows him knows that he was a cowboy a legend in the EOD tech community. But in that moment, he helped me, set up a litter and set up my casualty collection point. And then, at this point we're doing.
Can you clarify what you mean by set up your casualty collection point?
So essentially, when there's an incident like that, an attack, you need to set up what's called a casualty collection point, a CCP, and it's where you gather all the wounded and all the human remains. So at that point, there was walking wounded that we just directed back to the trucks at the checkpoint where we staged, and then there was dead, because like I said, when you're dealing with explosives, you either have concussions or you're dead. It's not often that there's in between, and it does happen, but usually, that's how it is. And so at this point, we're now just doing human remains recovery, because no matter what, living or dead, you don't leave anybody behind. You find as much of them as you can. You verify that they are dead, and then you send them home to their families, as much of them as you can.
And what does that mean to you personally, Adam? Like, why does it matter to you that no one's left behind?
It's like our sacred, it's our warrior ethos. It's in our soldiers' creed. Like, there's a creed, a lot of people don't realize this about the American military, and even other NATO allies don't have this esprit de corps, this love of our brotherhood, our family that we fight with. But when I say warrior ethos, that is the ideals that we subscribe to, that we live by, especially when you are an active duty warrior for our country in the Army, the Marine Corps, whatever. That is what we believe. Our warrior ethos are: I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. And I will never leave a fallen comrade. Like the four core things that we believe are our warrior ethos, our mentality, our ideals that we subscribe to as warriors. If you join the military and you don't fully believe that, then go find somewhere else to be. But yes, our warrior ethos are paramount, and it's what all of us, especially in combat arms, especially as medics in combat support, that is what we believe. And so yeah, and anybody else, you know, would say the same.
Sure.
So
you set up the CCP?
Yes, the casualty. Yeah. Yep.
Did I get those initials right?
Yep. Casualty
collection
point.
CCP.
Yep.
And you were still with Jeff Baker at this point? Okay.
Yep. So Jeff calms me down. He helps me set up the CCP, and then he had calmed me down and said, like, we're going to get our brothers out of here, and like it didn't matter to him. Just like I said before, like our warrior ethos, it didn't matter to him that these men were living or dead. We were going to get them. And he grabbed a litter himself and he walked out, because he was the senior bomb tech. He walks out to clear a path for us and, quote, interrogate a device, essentially. So he basically, that means what Hollywood would call defuse a bomb. The interrogation process for a device, a bomb, is figuring out like what it is, how to avoid it, how to best handle it. And what he's doing is he's clearing a path out to our most intact fallen brother at that point. And he sets this litter down and it goes off, like a bomb just goes off. And it's not like a Hollywood explosion. It's like a dust cloud. And again, this is maybe 25 meters, a quarter of a football field away from me. And that dust goes in the air. The blast causes me to just drop to my knees because I just watched my friend die, or at least, in that moment, I didn't know what happened to him. He just disappeared in a cloud of smoke, in a cloud of dust. And there was no fire, there was no nothing, just dust and smoke. And the platoon leader out there comes up and he picks me up and he just says, "Doc, where are you at?" And I'm like, I said, "I'm in Afghanistan, let's get to work." And I see there's new wounded out there. I rush to them. I grab my buddy that's laying out there. I flip him over. I do my blood sweep on him. I make sure he's not actively bleeding anywhere. Otherwise, I would have put tourniquets on him. And then when I realized that he just needs to be taken back to the casualty collection point, the one that's back at the checkpoint, I was like, "Hey, you two." And I just see two infantrymen standing there. And I was like, "Grab him, get him back to the trucks." Because I knew I needed to stay here. And because now it is this is the medics game right now. This is my bread and butter. I direct and I provide treatment and I direct treatment now. Because, and this is important, but prior to this deployment, I was in charge of teaching the entire battalion, our entire unit, CLS classes, combat life-saving skills. And so we were 100% trained and 100% competent on these skills. So I could ask anybody out there to do something and they would do it. So like the medic's job is a combat multiplier, essentially. Like if a medic is doing direct treatment at that point, there is something majorly wrong. Unless there is like, of course I do treatment, but like if I have people that can do it for me, well, I guide it, I'm more effective doing that.
Sure. Yeah, you're multiplying yourself.
Exactly. So at that point, that is in my mind, what I'm doing. So I fall back to where it was safe. And then I hear one of the other EOD techs standing in a safe area, that Jeff is down in this little river that's like 30 meters past our position, 35 meters past our position. So he basically was flown forward when he got blown up. And so I was like, "Oh no, he's going to drown." Because like otherwise I'm like, "Oh shit." Like, so I just rush down this, what I think is a cleared path. And then I step on a device myself. And in that moment, I'm like, "Oh," like I'm laying on my stomach at that point. And I'm like, "Oh, wow." I'm like trying to push up and all my buddies are like, "Doc, just stay down, man."
Did you even know what had happened? Like, did it, what?
I didn't feel.
Was it just like falling to your knees? I mean, what was that like?
I heard a snap, a pop, and then my ears were ringing and I was on the ground. And there was a cloud of dust maybe. And Yeah, I was laying on my stomach. I didn't have any pain. And I kept trying to stand up and I couldn't. And my buddies tell me, like, hey, doc, you're okay. Just stay down. And then all of a sudden I push up so hard that I fall backwards. And now I'm looking at my skeletal kneecaps and my tibula fibulas, my tib fib is just snapped off. And my boot is hanging off. My foot and my boot is just kind of hanging off to the side, still partially attached to me. And in that moment, I thought I was going to die. But it did feel like I had an eternity in that moment. Like time froze for me, where I could have died or I could have lived. I was kind of given a choice by God or the universe or my dying brain, whatever. That, you know, I could live or I could die in this moment, and either decision would be fine. And I chose not to die. I had a tourniquet on my vest. We practice one of those combat life-saving skills we practice is self-application. So I grabbed a tourniquet off my vest that was still intact. I'm trying to wrench it down on my leg. I get it as tight as I can. One of my buddies says, Adam, give me the thumbs up. And I go like this. And then I realize that one of my fingers is just kind of like hanging off. And I'm like, oh, so I grab onto it and I give him the thumbs up as best I can.
You grabbed onto your own finger?
Yes, basically it was like flopped like that kind of. And so I held onto it like this essentially. Wow. And yeah, that was honestly one of the things that kept me conscious, because in my mind, if I fell asleep or lost consciousness, I was going to die. So holding onto my finger was one of the few things I could do to keep myself conscious.
Wow.
And finally, one of my buddies gets up to me and he just says, Doc, tell me what to do. And I say, tourniquets high and tight. That's the phrase we use to remember where tourniquets go, even in, you know, when you lose all gross motor skills, or excuse me, fine motor skills. So the soldier, he was, you know, awesome. He knew what he was doing. Threw the tourniquets on, tightened the one I put on. And I was very, very fortunate that the medevac bird that had already been there to pick up the previous wounded had now made the courageous decision to come out and land 10 meters from my position, basically.
And that was courageous because you didn't know if there were bombs might have gone off that would have hit the bird potentially. So he flew into a danger zone to come get you.
Yes. So they actually had helmet cam footage. They had from the co-pilot and from the crew chief in the back in the cabin, essentially, of the helicopter, recording everything. So you hear them in their internal comms say, hey, because they actually saw me get blown up at a distance and they diverted, and then they come back around and they're like, hey, is everyone comfortable going in? This could be really shitty for all of us. And they decided, everyone was like, hey, we're going. They need us, go. You know, and so they all land it right there. The pilot is given the Silver Star. The rest of the crew is given other Valor Awards, essentially. And the entire crew got Medevac of the Year for 2013 because of this. And essentially they land 10 meters from me. My buddies throw me face down on a litter and they throw me in the bird.
Wow.
And that's, yeah.
Did that save your life that they showed up that quickly?
Yes, absolutely. Like there's several things that fell into place to ensure my survival that day, because I have truly learned that fortune does not favor the bold, fortune favors the prepared. And we were prepared in so many ways. Every part of that machine that is our unit was prepared in so many ways for that deployment. It started with the pre-deployment training. It started with our combat lifesaver training that I personally led. It started with you know, their professionalism as pilots and as flight medics in this, you know, in this medevac crew. But so much fell together that day. Like my tourniquets were applied so quickly that what's called the shunting process hadn't even stopped yet. So like I only lost the blood that was already in my legs when they were torn from my body.
Oh, wow.
So like basically your blood vessels, they quick, like for about a minute or so, 30 seconds to a minute, they clench. So they slow, your body slows its own bleeding essentially for like a little bit. And so my tourniquets were applied so quickly that even my femoral arteries hadn't truly started gushing blood just yet.
And it's phenomenal to me that you put your own tourniquet on after you were hit, I mean, to be hit and then to quickly put your own tourniquet on, I mean, is that you credit that to just the having so much training that you just like almost muscle memory knew what to do?
Yes.
Because you
So
had to be in so much shock as well.
yes. So I was very, very lucky at that point to again only have lost the blood that was in my legs. So I still had enough blood to be conscious, alert, and I had enough adrenaline in my body to not feel the pain of doing it. Because anybody that's ever had a tourniquet put on them, even in training, knows that it hurts. It's a very violent, painful act.
Mm.
And it's sort of a dichotomous thing in medicine that you do no harm, but in this particular case, you're causing pain to save a life, and that's
Sure.
something you must train when you're teaching tourniquets. But early on in my career, I decided to master the basics. The phrase is brilliance in basics. So I knew that the main thing that I would ever do would be tourniquet application, and if there is bleeding on a limb, the best solution in a traumatic setting is a tourniquet on a limb. And so I practice tourniquets. I like to say I practice tourniquets ad nauseum. I practiced so much that I was sick of doing it.
Yeah.
And now when I teach these classes to whoever, that is a phrase I use as ad nauseum. You must be sick of tourniquets. Like, it must be so boring to you to put a tourniquet on, but you must be so good at it. You must be better than everyone else.
Mm.
And I was, and the standard to get a tourniquet on it is within 30 seconds, and I could do it in 11 to 14 seconds, depending on what I was doing, and basically, yeah. But I am not alive because of myself. I'm alive because of my brothers as well. Like, had I gotten that tourniquet on, I still would have died. And so the only reason I survived that day was because of the love and the training of my brothers. And, the guy that came up to me, the only reason he asked me what to do was because he was keeping me in the fight. He knew what to do. Very much so. He was probably one of the best in the entire company that knew what to do. He was a leader, and he later, went on to do some pretty incredible things in the Army himself. And I can't say what those are, but some very specialized things. But he very much is responsible for saving my life, and so are all of my brothers that day. We don't do anything alone. We do everything as a pack. We do everything as a team. But anyway, I get on the helicopter. One of my buddies who was blown up with me is loaded on as well. And it's about an 8-minute flight to Kandahar Airfield, where the main Roll 3 facility, the main surgical center is. And during that flight, I'm just holding onto that finger. I jokingly, well, I guess not fully jokingly, but I asked for morphine. One of the guys pats on my back, and I'm like, "Hey, morphine." Because I now it wasn't hurting yet, but I knew it was going to, because I knew my adrenaline would wear off. And at that point, I was like, okay, well, I know that, if you make it off the battlefield, it's a 90 to 95% chance of survival. So I'm going to live at this point. In my mind, I knew I was going to live. And especially because they put me on the helicopter so quickly, even though my sense of time had been sort of messed up, I realized it was very quick. They take me off the bird. They load me onto a ground ambulance. There's a Navy corpsman there, and I'm still face down in the litter. I have a blanket on me, and he thinks I'm dead. and I'm like, I say, "Man, this is effed up." And he's like, "Whoa!" I had no idea. I had no idea you were alive. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm hurting, man." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't doubt it," very nervously joking with me. And then they get me into the surgical center, and there's 4 beautiful nurses and 1 handsome Chad doctor working on me. And I'm like, "You're all angels, you're all beautiful, please take good care of me." In my mind, I was sure I was going to live at this point. I would be shocked if not that I would have been around to care, but I would have been shocked if I had seen somebody else like me joking. I would have been shocked if that person had died, even with the catastrophic injuries I had at that point. Anyway, I'm still face down, and I'm still, I'm 22 years old. I'm a male. You can probably imagine what my main concern is. And
Sure.
yeah, and I was very fortunate that I was issued a combat diaper, what we jokingly refer to as a combat diaper. It's a Kevlar uh, cod piece essentially that protects your groin, your perineum, and your butt from blast trauma. And they took it off me, and I'm still face down, and they're like, hey, because you were blown up the way you were, we have to check for a spinal cord injury. And any medical professional at this point knows where I'm going. They had to, quote, check my oil.
I got it.
And, yeah. And so the nurse is like, what she said. I said, she tells me what she's like, I have to do a digital rectal exam on you. I got to put a finger up your butt. And I say, aren't you going to buy me dinner first? And she does. She puts the glove on. I hear the snap, and she says, dinner comes later. And she does it.
It's amazing to me that you were able to joke and, you know, like and that you were conscious this whole time. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Just what strength, Adam? What strength?
Honestly, like I going through that process made me realize that, like, yeah, I might be a little bit more resilient than most people, but honestly, I think that it falls back to fortune favors the prepared. If you prepare yourself for something like that, if you accept that you are in a line of work where that can happen to you, I truly believe that. I mean, you know, especially like Adam, your husband, Adam, and any of our brothers, had it been any of them, I truly think that they could have done the same thing, because it's like, we all prepared ourselves. We were all trained. We were all professional warriors. And as long as there is breath in our lungs, we are going to fight. And until that final breath is taken from us, we're going to find a way to fight, and we're going to find a way to win. Because that's just what we're taught to do.
Well, and I think too, what amazes me the most, at least from what I've witnessed through my husband, is also just that it all comes down to the commitment to the man beside you. And, you know, Adam's told me a story of being under gunfire, and he was running a mortar platoon at the time, and they had to leave their position. I'm not going to use all the, you know, official terms, but they had to, you know, run away from their position, and they left the mortar, and he had to go back and get, you know, it's like, you do not leave the mortar, when they realized, you know, they were going to have to leave the area. And Adam, you know, he was the senior leader on the team. So they were, you know, firing, and he had to run like through gunfire to get the mortar. And I stop and I really picture that situation. I'm like, how on earth can you make that decision to go back for a gun when there's gunfire coming at you, like that you're throwing yourself into this? And at the same time, you know, when he tells the story, what I really hear and pick up on is, well, because if he didn't do it, one of the other guys would have had to, and his job was to protect his men. And if you leave the mortar, that's putting more of your men in danger, you know, and like, so, you know, he had to go back and get it. And so it's not even necessarily a decision in the moment about like a conscious choice of bravery, but it is so brave because you're protecting and loving the men beside you so much. And that's what I think is so beautiful about the strength of
it's so funny,
men
like
serving together.
It's so funny. You never really consider courage, and you never really consider anything like that in the moment. It's always like, am I doing my job? Am I being a good teammate? Like, I don't want to let my guys down. I don't want to be perceived as a scumbag. You know, like, it's always like that. Like I just don't want to let anybody down. So I'm going to keep doing my best until I can't anymore, you know? And it really is. I've seen that from so many people that I served with, that like, so many guys are like, Doc, how do you do it? How did you survive? And it's like, because we had to, like there is no choice. Like, and I know that like that sometimes takes away the agency and maybe a little bit of the courage of it, but I don't really think, I think some people may see it that way, but I don't think it is. It's like, it's just that we're all so used to making those decisions and training, and we're so used to doing those things, that it's just what you do. It's a part of who you are at that point in your career and that part of your life. And like, war is what we're good at, and fighting for each other is what we do.
So you had the exam.
Yeah. And finally they flipped me over.
Okay.
And I'm like, finally, can you tell me if I'm good down there? And she gets herself a handful and she's like, "You're good, hon." And I was like, "Thank you. That's all I needed to know." And like, she's like, "You'll have children someday," or something along those lines. And they put the mask on me, and then they had me count back from 100 or whatever, and I'm out.
Mm.
Um, I
I'm so
wake up a
glad you
couple.
got that news before you fell asleep. It was
Oh
like,
yeah,
then you could finally be at peace for a little bit.
I know. Like, and it's funny. Like, I think they were laughing the whole time. Like, it was, and it's funny because like they actually, that surgical team sent me a letter when I was at Walter Reed, basically telling me in a more professional manner, in not so few words, that I was the funniest patient they ever had.
Oh.
Yeah, and I have that letter somewhere, and as soon as I find it someday, I'm gonna frame it, because like,
Mm.
just in the move of the last 12 years since this has happened, I've like boxed up so much, and I have to find that letter. I really truly do, because it's hysterical.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, they basically told me that I was the funniest patient they ever had.
Wow.
And so I wake up a couple hours later, and all of my brothers are there. Our command sergeant major, our battalion sergeant major, the father essentially of our battalion is there, and like, he's this big gruff man, works out 3 times a day, looks like the Hulk. Everyone found him scary, but like, we all kind of knew like he was kind of our dad. So like, if you were a good soldier, he treated you well. And like, he was sitting next to me, and he called me Adam for the first time ever, instead of by my rank, instead of by anything else. And I asked him, "Did Cody make it?" And he's like, "No, he didn't." And "Did Jeff make it?" "No, I'm sorry. Like, but you need to focus on yourself right now."
Mm.
And I was so high on painkillers at this point, and somebody walks in and he says, "Hartswick, how you doing?" And I said, "Good, dude. How are you?" And he goes, "Well, I'm a 3-star general, but you can call me that if you want." And it turned out it was General Milley, the General Milley, the current ISAF commander, the commander of all of American forces in Afghanistan.
Mm.
Um, and he's like, "I heard about what you did today, son. I'm battlefield promoting you to sergeant right now." And so they ripped some E5 patch off, and they put this Velcro patch on my hairy chest, and they took this stupid picture of me, and like, they gave me my Purple Heart while he was there. And then he said, "Hey, we're going to work on getting you another award later." And basically, I called at that point, like, they left, and they had me call my parents. And I was always told that you should never, basically, when you join, you have to pick somebody to view your human remains if you die. And they always tell you to never pick your mother, because your mother brought you into this world. She shouldn't have to see you as a corpse or as pieces.
Mm.
So you always pick your dad or your nearest male relative of some kind. And so I picked my dad. And so in my mind, I have to call my dad first, but he's at a hunting guide school in like the mountains of Colorado. And when I call him, I can't get a hold of him. I leave a message and I say, "Hey, Dad, be near your phone. I need to call you. I have something important to say. Hang up the phone." I don't tell him in the message. And so I call my mom then, and it's, in her defense, in Pennsylvania, it's like 3:30 in the morning or something when I call. And I'm like, "Hey, Mom, did you hear what happened?" And she's like, "No," because I assumed like the Red Cross had told her or something at this point, and they hadn't.
Okay.
And so I had to tell her myself, and I was like, "I lost my legs." And she goes, "Well, did they get you out of there?" And I was like, "Well, duh, of course, Mom." And like, and so she said, at that very moment, when my son was a smartass with me, I knew he was going to be okay. So yeah, like, and then I love you, Mom, blah blah blah. I hung up the phone. And then out of like a couple hours, like maybe 30 minutes later, this big, huge dude with a beard comes in, and he gives me a root beer and a satellite phone, and he says, "Call your dad." And I'm like, "Okay, don't hurt me." And and I was like, "Root beer, that's a really weird choice." And then I call my dad, and he asks, like, "Did you get your root beer?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I did," because like, my dad, one of our favorite things
Oh.
growing up was this local microbrewery. They made their own root beer, and so like, as a kid, we always drank it. Anyway, so it was my dad's way of like making sure I got a message from him, essentially.
Oh,
And so
wow.
yeah, so I call him, and I tell him what happened, and he's like, the first thing he says is, "Did they get your wedding tackle?" or "Is your wedding tackle okay?" Something along those lines. And I was like,
Mm.
"Yeah, Dad, it's okay. You'll have grandchildren someday." And And then I say like, hey, they got my trigger finger. And he's like,
Mm.
oh, don't worry, we can teach you how to shoot with anything else, so you're good to go there. And, basically love you, bye, hang up the phone. And then basically that starts the journey of traveling from hospital to hospital. It's like a 6-day journey back to Walter Reed at Bethesda, Maryland, the new Walter Reed. And right before I get on the plane to leave there, the only man that I managed to save that day, comes up to me and he kisses me on the forehead and he says, Doc, you saved my life. And like, that was like the most powerful thing I've ever experienced. And like, that man is now a father of 3. And like, I just like could not be happier to know that like that man is alive today.
Mm.
And, but yeah, it was a 6-day journey. I went from Kandahar Airfield to Bagram Airfield to Longstool, Germany to Walter Reed in Bethesda, Maryland.
Was there any one person that was with you the whole time? Like, were there people there that were, I mean, were you alone on and off that
Basically,
time?
well, so like depending on where we were, there was other wounded from that day.
Okay.
And then unfortunately, there was even more wounded on May 16th, 2 days later. And like, as Adam will tell you, like that was a whole like month-long engagement in that area, basically. And I think at the end of it, there was over 24 wounded and there was 4 killed. So the 4 killed were Sergeant First Class Jeff Baker, Specialist Mitch Daling, Specialist Willie Gilbert, and then Specialist Cody Taus, my subordinate, the platoon medic that was out there. And I have them tattooed on my forearm.
Mm.
Because if anybody that's ever worn those memorial bracelets that we wear often, they realize that they break after a couple of years. And I was like, I'm tired of these breaking. It feels disrespectful. So I'm just going to get it tattooed.
Oh, wow.
Now it's
Mm.
permanent.
And
But
if we can take a moment for Jeff, Mitchell, William, and Cody, is there anything you'd like to share that you haven't had a chance to yet about them, their service, or that day?
they, it's always so tragic when we lose somebody like those 4 men because they truly were the best of us. And I know that like a lot of people would see that as like romanticizing them, but like truly those men were the best of us. Like I said before, Jeff was a legendary EOD tech, but beyond that, he was a father, like and a son and a so and a mentor. So many people love Jeff and all his potential and all that he could have been was taken away from him and taken away from all of us. And Mitch, I didn't know Mitch as well as the others, but he was more athletic and driven than most of us. He, every time I'd catch him in the open air gym that we had, he was doing some crazy stuff with the heavy bag. And he would, in between his sets on the heavy bag, he would wrap his legs around it and then do like upside down sit-ups off of it. And like he'd be like sprinting around the outpost, the inside perimeter of the outpost, like maintaining his cardiovascular. He was just always doing some kind of crazy workout, smoking everybody else. He was probably the most top 3 most athletic people in the entire company.
Mm.
And then Willie, he might be the most tragic of all. His wife was pregnant.
Mm.
And I remember after one really grueling patrol, we came back and he needed an IV. And I hooked him up in the aid station there after the patrol. And we were just talking and he told me how excited he was to be a dad. And like his daughter was going to be born in late May.
Mm.
And he was killed like a week or 2 before she was born. So like Michaela will never know her father other than through us. And like she's just the spitting image of her dad too. Like and I got to hold her after that deployment and it was just the most surreal thing. And like at that point in my life I didn't value being a father myself, but now I certainly do. And like I was just so glad that like a part of him still exists in this world through her, and she's just a wonderful, just. And then with Cody, Cody was the best medic in the entire company, better than me and kinder than me. And he would go on every patrol passing out candy to all the kids of Afghanistan, like truly doing the mission that we were there to do, winning hearts and minds. He was the person that actually committed to doing it, where the rest of us just did our best. He was actually doing it, you know. And like one time I was able to on a patrol give a candy bar or a protein bar or something to a kid, but he did it all the time. Like he would go out of his way to do it. He would bring extra candy with him, extra food with him, like, and made sure that the kids got to eat, you know. And he actually did it so much that even the locals started calling him Candy Doc, you know. So like, yeah, so like our own guys called him Candy Doc so much that even the locals started calling him Candy Doc, as far as I remember. So yeah, these four men were truly, truly the best of us, incredible human beings and people that we should all aspire to be, though we may fail, you know.
I so appreciate you sharing those details about them. These men, I've heard their names for a decade since I got together with my husband. And Adam and I started dating a month after he got out of the military. And that was in October or November. And then that first May, on May 14th, he was angry and not super kind that day. And I remembered thinking, like, what is going on with you? Like, you're just looking to fight with me over everything today. And he mentioned that it was a tough day for him. And then the next year, when we started doing counseling together he saw a counselor for moral injury, we started going together. And I noticed again on this same day in May, he brought up it was a tough day, and he was just so edgy. And we ended up talking about it with our counselor together, and that's when the first time he opened up and shared about what had happened. And while my husband wasn't actually there that day, from what I understand, his platoon came in they were part of the
probably the battalion's QRF.
The searching, yeah,
search and rescue.
Yeah, search and rescue. Thank you. That's what I was trying to find. Yep. And so he was part of that, and and he knew the men, not well, but knew them. I think he knew Cody more than anybody.
Right.
And so I've been hearing their names for a decade, and I've seen how much this has impacted my husband. And again, he didn't know them very well. And hearing you even just share these little details about them, it matters and it's meaningful. And it took me a long time to really understand why it matters so much to say their names, to know their names, to keep their names alive. But every May 14th, we say their names, and our daughter knows their names now, and she says their names. And some of our closest friends know their names, and they're said on May 14th. Well, so actually there's one more thing I want to tell you, and then I have a question. But before our daughter was born, she was born in 2021. So when I was pregnant, we were talking about names for our child, and Adam had brought up, possibly including names of some of his brothers, or one of his brothers that had fallen. And we talked about Taus for a middle name. And at the time, and again, this was 4 or 5 years ago, at the time, I talked to a couple of family members about it. And then we, I got some feedback, and maybe that, well, if I gave my daughter or son this middle name, it's a unique name, they'd have to explain it. Then there would always be maybe this like sadness attached to their name. And right. So at the time I was like, okay, yeah, maybe that's not the best way. And that was before my husband and I had done psychedelic healing together, before I started to more deeply understand and really see and hear more of his experience, and before I really understood why it matters to know their names and to honor their names, and how much it matters to my husband. And so now, Adam and I have gone through a lot of healing and deeper experiences together. And now I look back, and that's something I would do differently. And I would absolutely give my daughter the middle name Taus, because to me, it's not about, this being a sad day of regret. It's about a day that is such an amazing demonstration of love for your fellow man.
Absolutely. Like, I think, especially this year, especially like 12 years on from May 14th, 2013, I have learned to summarize how I feel now with two words, and it's love and loyalty. And those two things matter to me more than anything else. I am loyal to a fault. Like, and I think that that is important for all of us to have that just staunch loyalty. And one of the silliest examples I can think of was there was a platoon sergeant. He wasn't my platoon sergeant, but he was one of the platoon sergeants in the first line company I served in, the one that I went to Iraq with. And he said on a weekend safety brief one time, he's like, "Hey, if you kill somebody, call me first. I have a buddy with a pig farm." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Pigs eat everything." And I was like, oh, you're offering to hide a body for me, like, and it's just like
It took me a minute. I got it now. Okay.
I know. I didn't get it either at first. And he's like, so this man, we mattered so much to him that he was, you know, serious or joking. He was willing to hide a body for us, like, and, and so from then on, I just valued building my loyalty for my team, and for my people, and for, if you've ever read the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger, he talks about what tribe is, and what pack is, and what family is, and what a team is. And like my wife and I, we always say that we're a team. And especially like in the last year, we had a miscarriage about a year ago, and we had been trying to conceive for like 3 years. And obviously that hurt me, but it hurt her more. And what the worst part of it, it's labeled, the style of miscarriage we had was labeled as a missed miscarriage, meaning that the baby had died in her, and then her body would not let go of it. And it just shows how wonderful of a human being she is, that she won't let go of even a dead child, and like, so we had to go through the awful process of, having this dead child in her, and like going through that. But during that entire time, she's the one that's usually picking up the slack on my end, but like, we are a team, and I will pick up the slack for her. And that's exactly what I did during that time. I reminded her that like, we are a team, that like, we'll make it through this together, and like, we will do this again. Like, we conceived without any, outside assistance. We will do it again, and like you said, we have names picked out that are somehow related to May 14th as well. And it's just, I think that building that tribe, that pack, that team, that family is so important to your survival as a human being, but especially as a warrior. Like you said in the beginning, like, we need to have a circle that values what we've been through, and having that tribe, that pack, that team is essential to who we are as human beings, because we are pack hunters. We are like caveman human. We were pack hunters, and we evolved as pack hunters. So like, we hunt and we thrive, and we have always been warriors. We've always been hunters, and we do everything as a team. So to try to exist as a lone wolf will get you killed, in one way, shape, or form, whether it's by your own hand or by the mistakes you make as a lone wolf. You will die, in either a moral death or a very real one. So like, you must learn early and practice your loyalty and your love for your tribe, your pack, your team, as often as you can. Always be a good member of your team.
And you're reminding me too, what we talked about at the beginning, being a good member of the team. I think that's, for me, at least as a civilian, that's part of my role on the team, is being the community to whom your experience matters, caring about the stories, knowing their names, remembering their names, honoring their names. I'm curious if you can tell us, just in your own words, Adam. I have my own reasons why it matters to remember their names. Why does it matter for you that people know and remember their names?
For me, it matters. I mean, because a lot of people will say that like, no one ever truly dies unless their name is no longer spoken, something along those lines. But I don't, I mean, I don't believe that. I think that in one way, shape, or form, somebody lives forever through their actions. They're immortalized. But I want people to know the cost of war, and I want people to know the type of people that we lose every time we decide to go to war. Because I do believe that war can be necessary, but I believe that diplomacy should be paramount and that diplomacy should prevail in 99.9% of all situations, because the awful cost of war. And like anytime somebody wishes death upon somebody, it's usually somebody who has not experienced what we have. Because there's so many times that people do vigilante murders nowadays in this country, and like people celebrate the men that do that, or the people that do that. And it's like, no, you don't kill somebody based on your own moral reasoning. It's something that should be decided by experts and by people that have lost and exhausted all other options, and in 99.9% of situations, you will find that it is not necessary. And it is because there is so much potential that is in every human being, whether it's to change or to, better somebody else or whatever. You should never snuff out a human life,
Oh, you just brought up another question for me too that I want to ask you about. That's fast forwarding a little bit and into kind of what happened with Afghanistan. But before we go there, let me first hear a little more about your recovery, because I imagine that was a significant journey. I'd love to hear a little more about, I mean, what was that like? How did you get to where you are now, that you have used your experience to now be serving others, teaching others, speaking, inspiring? Tell us more.
I had always been one of my favorite. So there's three main jobs as a medic. Obviously, combat life-saving, like being the one that drops everything to save a life in combat. Obvious, that's paramount. Second is sick call, running, being the one that will treat the sick and the hurt. Passing out Tylenol and ibuprofen, telling them to drink water and telling them to change their socks, being there for the mental hurt, the anguish of their wife cheating on them while they're deployed or whatever. Being the shoulder to cry on is so important as a medic. Teaching them to cry, because so many times you're dealing with and I was this too. I'm not saying this, immune to this criticism, but I was that emotionally stunted child too, like so many of us were. But I think I learned a little earlier than many of the grunts I served with that we must cry, and we must learn how to cry and when to cry. So I was always teaching my guys that. And, but then the final responsibility is being an instructor, being the person that teaches others how to save lives, because it multiplies our effectiveness and saves more lives. And so I loved teaching those classes. I found out that I loved being an instructor, and I think it came from my dad, because my dad was a marksmanship instructor at Fort Drum, New York, and then at Fort Dix, New Jersey. He served all over, training tens of thousands of soldiers how to shoot. He taught a squad designated marksman's course, meaning there would be one person in a squad who was like the Jedi Knight, the warrior that shot better than everybody else, So I had been through all of his classes even before I joined, because I was a decent shot. But anyway, so I knew that one way, shape, or form, my job was to continue one of those four responsibilities. And I knew that I couldn't be a line medic anymore. I knew I couldn't necessarily stand to go to school to do any more of the sick call stuff, to be a doctor or anything like that, but I knew that I was a good instructor. And eventually a company called Techline Technologies reached out to me during my recovery. And they're like, hey man, we want to give you a job. The second you're out of the Army, come teach a class for us. So they took a chance on me 2 years. Like within weeks of May 14th, they had reached out to me.
Wow.
Because my story had gone through like Military Star and all these like military, news networks and stuff like that. Anyway, the first 3 months of my recovery were hell. I had the worst pain I've ever experienced. I had to do wound debridements where they were literally taking wire. Now I was unconscious. They put me under for this, but they had to take wire brushes to my wounds and scrape the meat that was left in me. They had to get the rocks and dirt and shrapnel out of me. They had to do revisions where they had to cut the bone until they could fold the flesh over and sew it to my bone, anchor it to my bone. It's called myodesis when they anchor the flesh to what's left of your bone. I had to do skin grafts. I had to do all sorts of awful things. Basically, the first 2 years of my recovery were about 25 surgeries, and that's actually significantly less than most people. And I have no idea why that is. Probably luck of the draw. Genetics, nutrition, whatever. Most guys had over 50 to 100 surgeries that I knew.
Wow, I had no idea it was that high.
Yeah. I actually know a guy with over 150 surgeries. Now he's a triple amputee. He lost 3 limbs, but again, like there's a lot that can go wrong even after you've lost your limbs and after you've had everything sealed up. But the pain I had was so bad that the only thing that could relieve it was Dilaudid, which is like 70 times more powerful than morphine, and then ketamine. And I remember the first time I got hit with ketamine, it was like a crazy trip, like an out-of-body experience. Like I got hit with it. I could feel it like radiating warmth from the injection site. I could feel it warming my body. My vision pixelated. Then it went gold. So all I saw was pixelated gold everywhere. And then I felt like my soul lift out of my body. And like
I can relate in some ways. Having done psychedelic journeys.
Yeah. So I know that like ketamine is not quote psychedelic, but it is a dissociative, and it makes you not care about pain so well that they are now using it in battlefield medicine. Like they have ketamine auto injectors now that they use on the battlefield in smaller doses to make you not care about pain. Wow. And there's a quote from a movie that says ketamine is a hell of a drug. Special K is a hell of a drug, and it is absolutely a hell of a drug that I will never touch again. But I have gained a significant amount of empathy as to why people seek it out, because it certainly makes you not care about anything. Anyway, I spent 2 years going through the worst physical therapy, learning how to use prosthetic legs, use a wheelchair. I went through two awful breakups while I was at Walter Reed. I got into an inappropriate relationship with one of my providers, and that was a bad breakup for me. But I ended up. One of my therapists said like, "Hey, try online dating," and I ended up meeting the woman who would become my wife someday through online dating. And it's funny because when she tells her side of the story, she almost didn't give me a chance because she was in Altoona, Pennsylvania at the time, and I was in Bethesda, Maryland, and like she had only put her radius as like 50 miles or whatever, and I was over 200 miles away. And it's like, hey, no, I'm actually from State College, but please give me a chance. I'm traveling back and forth right now. I met her like a couple months before I medically retired. I met her in December of 2014, and we quickly started dating. Like we were infatuated with each other from the beginning, and we've been together ever since. Wow.
So that was almost a year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And one question about before meeting your wife. What was, I can't imagine, there had to be depression and, like so much emotional things to move through with, and I shouldn't assume, I guess. I wonder if there was depression. What was that like for you mentally, emotionally? To come to terms with having lost your legs?
There's a very powerful thing that they have to do for every amputee, because you can't, of course you see yourself from your own perspective. But one thing they have to do, and they can't have anybody else around it, is it's usually you and like one nurse. And I don't know if they do this anywhere else, but they did it at Walter Reed for me. They brought in a mirror and they brought in my favorite nurse, and she took off my wrappings. And it's a very like somber thing, but she's like, you need to look in the mirror and you need to see yourself. And like, I didn't have my parents there. I didn't have anybody but this nurse. And she like pulled off my wrappings and she's like, I need you to look in the mirror. And like, I saw myself and I bawled, you know what I mean? Like I was missing so much of myself. Like, I think somehow they equated that I'm missing almost 25% of my body. So from head to toe, I had a traumatic brain injury, bilateral perforated eardrums, muscle avulsion from my right arm, amputation of my right index finger, the tip of my right thumb. I broke the acetabulum, meaning the socket of my right hip, and then I had both of my legs amputated from above the knees. So it's catastrophic injuries, multi-systems trauma. And when you see that in the mirror, it's very, very awful the first time. You know, it's a hell of a thing. And especially in the first 3 months, I had to like, I almost could not allow myself to feel the loss of my brothers, even because I just had to focus on myself. You know, and it seems selfish, but like, I think they all would have agreed with me, you know. And it's like, I think even somebody has said one time that like the dead are afforded no luxury when the living have need. And it's like, it's a sort of a heartless thing to say, but they would have said the same thing, you know, had I been in, you know. And it's like again, it's the team mentality. Like, they know that I need to recover, even if they're you know, somewhere else in another plane of existence right now. They know what I need, what I mean. Doesn't mean I don't love them. It doesn't mean that I don't care. It just means that I have to survive right now.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I would completely argue with you that it's at all selfish or heartless, because to me, it's like, how could you have the capacity to mourn them when you were still mourning yourself, you know, and mourning what you lost? I mean, you suffered a huge loss. You know, like you said, it has nothing to do with your feelings for them. It's what you have capacity for, and you're human.
Right. So I was very lucky to have both my parents there. And like, my parents divorced when I was a 1.5 years old. They were basically like together long enough to get married, have me divorce, you know. So but they actually, I saw them hug for like the first time ever when I lost my legs. And like, my dad would spend every night in my hospital room making sure that I would wake up if I was having like ketamine induced nightmares, because the thing they don't tell you about ketamine is when you're on it, you have very vivid dreams and you have very vivid nightmares. And that's something to get in at another time, essentially. But like, my dad would wake me up the right way every single night that I was having those awful dreams. And then my mom was there, being the best mom she knew how to be. You know, she was comforting me. She would massage my shrapnel injuries. You know, very, very awesome mom. And I had the best nurses, the best physical therapists, the best occupational therapists, the best doctors I've ever met. Like, to this day, the two main doctors that worked on me were Gabriel Pavey and Dr. Ted Steelman. They were just two incredible human beings. Dr. Gabriel Pavey was an infantryman in the Army, and one day he got sick of it and wanted to be a doctor. And then Dr. Ted Steelman was a Blue Angels fighter pilot, and he got bored of it one day and he's like, I want to be a surgeon now. So he went from fighter pilot to surgeon. So I had two.
Bit of an overachiever, like, maybe.
Exactly. I had like two of the best possible people working on me. And even after a long day, they would both come visit me and watch TV with me, like in my room. I had this like crazy big screen TV on my wall in Walter Reed there, and they would come and just sit and watch TV with me. It was like such this crazy thing that these doctors would take. You know, these men loved their jobs and they loved the men that they served. You know what I mean? Like, and again, it goes back to the pack, goes back to the team. Like, these men were military men through and through, and they never lost that pack, that team mentality. So like, if there's a theme of our conversation, if there's a theme of my life, of your life, it's pack, it's tribe, it's family, it's love, it's loyalty, you know, it's all those things. And it's like, all of us hold on to that more than anything else, and all of us value that more than our own lives, you know.
Wow, I literally am like overwhelmed in this moment. For those listening on audio, I'm like sitting back in my chair, gripping my chest, because I just felt the the energetic weight of what you just described, of that tribe, that family, like how important it is to, I think in those seasons where you feel so alone, or you can feel so alone, how important it is to have those people.
Mm-hmm.
And to know, like, really, to me, it's that having that kind of tribe, that family, it's affirming for us how loved we actually are.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of us deeply desire to know that we are deeply loved.
Oh yeah, it's something so innate in who we are as human beings. I used to mistakenly say we were pack animals, but that's the wrong term. It's pack hunters. We are pack hunters, and I think that's even, it's even better because I mean, it shows you that we've always been warriors as human beings. Like, yeah, your husband Adam and I chose to be our modern warriors, but as human beings, we are meant. We were fighters first. We were warriors first. We had to hunt. We had to kill. We had to survive, and we always did it as a pack. We always did it as a team. And it's something so innate to us, and all of us need that in one way, shape, or form. Like I said, like the lone wolf dies alone, and there is nothing more important in this life than being a member of a team.
How do you find that now? You've been out of the military for, and so actually, so you, when were you medically retired? December of 2014?
No, so I met my wife in December of 2014. I medically retired in May of 2015,
Okay.
April or May of 2015. And I then taught my first class for tech line in June of 2015.
Okay.
So just a couple months after I medically retired, and I blew it out of the water. And like all the guys there were like, "Hey, we took a gamble on you like 2 years ago, and it paid off like dividends,"
Wow. And wait, sorry. So let me just back up for 1 minute to wrap my mind around this. So you were at Walter Reed for a long time, but then weren't you also going back to El Paso? Because my husband tells me that when he got back from Afghanistan, there was some kind of mix up an issue and they got stuck. And for like a month before they could end up getting home. So his parents had come in to welcome him home. They weren't there. So everyone had to go back. And so they came home. And I remember he teared up at the dinner table telling me the story that, so they, got back from serving a year overseas. And he said, and so my family wasn't there. My friends weren't there. And he said, but Adam Hartswick was there and he was standing when we came off the plane.
So yeah, basically because I was still in the Army, I was afforded a lot of leniency. Like I didn't have to wear a uniform anywhere. I had relaxed grooming standards. Because essentially I was on blood thinners at the time. So like I could grow my facial hair out, I could grow my hair out. Like if I had nicked myself, I would have bled forever, essentially. And it was just unnecessary. So I showed up wearing like athletic, like civilian athletic clothes with like a little bit of facial hair, longer hair, like looked like a complete scumbag in terms of military standards.
They were all probably jealous as hell.
Exactly. And so I was there to like hug all my guys when they came back, and like the army knew that would be important for my recovery, and they knew that was for everybody's recovery. So yeah, I was able to go back to El Paso. They gave me an ARCOM with Valor, which is basically an Army Commendation Medal with a Valor device, meaning it's like a medal that can be given for merit, like you did a good job, pat you on the back, or you can get it for valor, meaning like you were brave in combat, and they put a little special little V on it. So it's like the lowest, I like to say it's the lowest award you can get for valor. So it's like Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Bronze Star, and then Service Commendation Medal. So like Army Commendation Medal, Navy Commendation Medal, whatever. They gave me that there, and then I actually was able to go back to Afghanistan in June of 2014 for Operation Proper Exit. There's like a charity called the Troops First Foundation, and they take basically they're run by a man who was in the CIA, and he had connections to all the generals, and he would take wounded warriors from Walter Reed and all the military hospitals across the country and take us back to Afghanistan so we could experience that brotherhood again. Because as we've said this entire time, being a part of that brotherhood is so important. And I was actually able to fly over Kilewal, where Adam and all the guys had turned that place into a, pardon my French, fucking parking lot. You know,
Mm.
and so I got to see, like, from the air, like how well they had, you know, leveled that place. And then I got to go to Fob Pasab, which was the nearest forward operating base to us, and talk to the unit that was there and be like, hey, 13 months ago, I lost my legs here and I'm standing in front of you right now on my prosthetic legs. And it was such a powerful thing to do. And like, I met some really amazing other wounded warriors there. I got to go with 2 Green Berets and a triple amputee who was also named Adam. So while we were there, he was Adam 1 and I was Adam 2 because he was a triple amputee and he had 1 limb left and I had 2 limbs left. So, but yeah, there was two incredible Green Berets, and I'm not sure if I should say their names or not, but like, I got to learn a lot from them while I was there, and we got to hang out with their Green Beret friends at Camp Moorhead and shoot all their cool guns at their range and stuff. And it was just such a cool little experience. It was like about a month and a half, something like that. I can't remember how long it was, but I got to basically hop around Afghanistan as a VIP. So they treated me as a VIP. And like, it was funny when we showed up with all these Green Berets, they heard a VIP was coming through and they all shaved their beards for us, thinking it was some kind of like actual VIP. And we're like, no, why'd you shave your beards? Like, what? And they're like, we didn't know who you were. We're so sorry. And I'm like, I'm sorry. You had to shave your cool beard, you know, like, but yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, it sounds like it was empowering, you know, having these experiences of like welcoming the guys home, getting to go back to Afghanistan. What else would you say were the most significant things you experienced that helped you really on your healing journey? And I mean emotional healing, not
Yeah,
just physical.
just learning. I mean, especially learning that you're not by yourself, like learning that you are, you know, a valued member of a team is, again, I can't stop repeating that. I will beat the dead horse of that over and over again, but like, that is so important. And finding, you know, somebody that loves you, you know, in a romantic sense, that will be that team member that's always there with you, is absolutely vital. And learning to shut your mouth and get the job done. You know what I mean? Even if like you're experiencing pain, understanding that there's more important things than pain. Like, you have to put the prosthetics on, you have to go walk, you have to get in the wheelchair, you have to get out of bed. And if you can't do it on your own, you have to ask for help. And absolutely, like, you absolutely have to cry. And like I said before, I learned that early on. I had a drill sergeant who was in Marine Corps Special Ops Infantry, so Marine Recon, before he was in the Army. And he told us all, but especially me as a medic, that if you're going to be a combat soldier, you must learn how to cry. And as a medic, you must teach your men how to do that. The men that are under your care, how to do that, because they're not going to be able to.
Yeah.
And I think hearing that is one of the most important things I ever learned, as a young man. I was, you know, as a 19-year-old kid in basic training. But
Yeah, that's kind of amazing to me, actually, and encouraging to me to hear that you were taught that by an officer, by another soldier, because you know, my husband's experience, he received some different encouragement, conditioning, you know, and taught
yes,
you bottle those feelings up. And we've had a lot of conversations about this, that of course, you know, it's a great skill when you're on the battlefield, when you're in combat, to be able to suppress your emotions and just focus, you know, on the job. And I mean, you know, you had to do that when you were, you know, there on May 14th. And
oh yeah,
of course, like, being able to refrain from falling apart is necessary. And at the same time, you know, it's a skill that serves on the battlefield. But I've, you know, watched Adam and other veterans we know, you know, come home. And if you haven't learned how to also meet it with being able to cry, being able to express your emotions, you know, all that stuffing causes depression and anxiety. And I think in some ways we've done a lot of our warriors a disservice by not creating stronger integration and healing and learning that kind of emotional expression, because, you know, they come home and like so much stuff's bottled up. And then again, speaking from my experience with Adam, you know, and then he feels misunderstood and, you know, struggling with purpose and all these different things, and everything's bottled up. And then that's why he would wind up exploding at times. You know, he was walking around, we'd always say like most people are walking around at like a 1 to 2 in like kind of someone, you know, having like anger or just like being activated, and he was walking around at a 6 or 7, so he got 10 like that. And
Yep.
yeah, and so it's kind of amazing to me to hear that and encouraging to me to hear that you supported other soldiers in learning how to cry.
Oh yeah, I had so many. I think that is the role of the medic more than, I mean, more than almost anything else, is to be that person that teaches them that. Because like, and I think there's only a specific type of medic that can teach them that, and it's only doc. If you're not doc, you can't teach them that. You have to be the warrior medic that can shoot better than them, that can beat them up in a fight, that can, you know, out PT them. You know, you have to be an example and you have to be a leader. And then they will take you seriously when you say, hey man, like we just witnessed something awful. Why don't we, or you know, hey man, like your wife just cheated on you and you're not crying. Like I would be crying. So what the hell's wrong with you? We should be doing this, you know, like, hey, I got a pack of smokes. Let's go sit down and burn through these real quick, you know. There's so many times when I got to do that, and it was a privilege every time to share that information with them. And like, honestly, one of the most important people I taught to do that because was my dad. He taught me the opposite. Like he, you know, as a kid, he even told me one time that real men don't say the word cute. And, you know, now I have a menagerie of animals in my house and I say cute every single day, several times. But like, you know, I love my cats, my black German Shepherd, my hermit crabs, my bunny. You know, I have so many animals that my wife and I raise. But like, you basically, we had this cat. Her name was Hazel, and my dad. She loved my dad for some reason. She would just sit on my dad's lap every time he came over. And like, even when she was like dying and had cancer, like my dad would hold her, and like he would like in his own way like not be able to express like I'm feeling this awful thing inside me. And I'm like, yeah, dad, like I remember this wholesome moment one time she was purring on his lap, and he's like, what is she doing? And like he had never heard a cat purr before. And like, and I was like, Daddy, she loves you. Like she's purring because she loves you. And like my dad like was quiet and like came into himself kind of, and I could tell he was like choked up. And then like we had to put her down eventually because she had cancer, and like my dad bawled, like ugly cried. And I was like, Dad, I'm really proud of you. Like that is such a strong thing you just did. And like I think it was the opposite of like anything he had ever been taught, because like his dad was a World War II veteran, and like that generation notoriously bottled everything up and hurt everybody around them because of it. And like I think my dad is in a much better place now, you know, even like because he felt the miscarriage we experienced as well, because he was excited to be a grandpa. And I think that miscarriage affected him so much that he like doesn't even drink anymore, and he's lost like 30 pounds now. And like he's like, because my dad was always the stud. Like he had a six-pack until he was like 55 years old, because he was infantry all his life, you know. And like, and so like when he got out of the army, he like lost his sense of purpose, and I think he gained a lot of weight. But then like when that cat died, and then when we went through that miscarriage, I think it just taught him a little bit about emotional growth and resilience. And like I think sometimes you need that struggle, that sadness, that awful sorrow in your life to teach you those things. Because I would never change anything that happened to me in my life, because I wouldn't be who I am today without it. So I do believe we all, men, women, warriors, or otherwise, need to have some form of sorrow in our life and some form of struggle in our life to better us.
With that, and let me say too, I so appreciate circling back to the very beginning, that you're here, that you're willing to share your story, Adam, and that you're also sharing about the healing and the recovery and the resiliency and how you wouldn't change it. Because I also think that we could feature more of the inspiring stories of veterans, you know, the hero stories of veterans. I think, or at least this is something, you know, Adam used to talk about, again, a decade ago, but he would bring up, you know, how he heard so many stories all the time about veterans that were struggling with PTSD, struggling with alcoholism, you know, struggling with drug addiction, and that one of his biggest fears was being just another damaged veteran. And he so didn't want that. And granted, he made a lot of great choices to, you know, to experience his own healing journey. And I also think there's a lot of veterans that can relate to that. And so, one, having more stories, you know, be told of healing, of homecoming, and when I mean spiritual, emotional homecoming, you know, is so important. And I also think it is important to understand the struggles and to understand the sorrow and understand, you know, where that time does not heal trauma. And so I believe there's a lot of veterans still walking around that are in a lot of pain from their trauma because time doesn't make it go away.
Yeah,
So, go ahead.
I certainly learned that. I think even for the longest time, I said time heals all wounds, but I don't think it was until we had a miscarriage that I understood that that isn't true at all. You just, in the best case, you get stronger and it becomes easier to carry that pain. So I had the fortune, like I said before, back in May, I went up to Boston for the Boston Wounded Veterans Run, and it's a motorcycle run through the entire city. And I was one of the honorees, and the other honoree was David Traylor, who was wounded during the Kabul evacuation at the end of the war. And he was at Abbey Gate, where the basically a suicide bomber had detonated at the entry control point, basically killing, you know, countless Marines, wounding him and countless others. And he has a awful, tragic story. And, you know, he was 22 at the time, just like I was at the time of my attack. And, you know, I'm 12 years on and he's 5 years on from, or 4 years on from what happened to him. So he's still very fresh and still very angry, and justifiably so. And he, you know, asked me in a quiet moment we had during the event, like, does it get easier? And I was like, I think he asked, does the pain go away? And I was like, the pain does not go away, but you will get stronger and it will get easier to carry it. And I think that was the best thing I could say to him in that moment. And I don't think I would have had that wisdom had I not experienced everything I have in the last year.
So tell me more about how you have turned your pain into purpose. You've turned your experiences into service. Tell us a little more about how you're doing that.
So yeah, I think I mentioned before, I was hired by Techline Technologies and their subsidiary Techline Trauma to train battlefield medicine to anybody that took a class, basically. So anyone from law enforcement to firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, school teachers, because Sandy Hook was still fresh in the minds of people at the time in 2015. And we trained an entire high school in battlefield medicine one time. Wow. And all the teachers, all the gym teachers, everybody, janitors, everybody showed up for that. And like everybody they were honestly some of the best students we ever had because they had no preconceived notions and they were ready to learn. Because sometimes when you train other warriors of any profession, they kind of like, oh yeah, I know. And it's like, yeah, I know, you know, but just listen to me. Like, you know. And so,
no, I know.
Right, exactly. So it's like the school teachers were the best medics I ever made, you know, the best lifesavers I ever made because they knew how to learn.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can see that.
Exactly. So, and like, so I did that for a long time. I traveled across the country training thousands of people. I think a rough count would be, now that I've trained over 20,000 people, maybe more, depending on who's heard my story online or whatnot. I know that basically millions of people have heard my story now from the various interviews and the shows I've been a part of, all that stuff. But the training I've done at least has directly affected tens of thousands of people. And now I work for Penn State University, and I don't have to travel more than 20 minutes, which is great. Because
Sure.
traveling across the country is good for about a decade. I'll give them that, and then it kind of loses its allure. And but now I train for Penn State Outreach. They run the Sheriff's Academy for the entire state of Pennsylvania. So I train all of the sheriff's deputies coming through the academy for the entire state. So all of the newest sheriff's deputies for the last 6 classes have been trained by me in tactical medicine. Basically, I told you before, there's a video of my medevac, and I actually have turned that into a teaching tool. So, I mean, I watch this video every time I teach a class. I explain the lessons learned. I explained why tourniquet application is so vital, why we must practice tourniquets ad nauseum. I actually recently created a list of perishable skills for the academic board. Perishable skills is in skills that if you do not practice them, you will lose your competency with them. So like tourniquets being the priority, like you must practice them all the time. For the rest, I said for the rest of your career, these are the 5 skills you must practice the rest of your career. As long as I always say to these sheriff's deputies that you, first and foremost, you are a protector of life. And one of the core law enforcement responsibilities, at least in Pennsylvania, it might be nationwide now, is bleeding control. So like I say, if you carry a gun, you must also carry a tourniquet. So the core law enforcement responsibility that I train is bleeding control. So I was like, hey, these are the 5 skills that you must know. Tourniquet application, wound packing, recovery position and airway management, and then being comfortable carrying and then drawing and appropriately using your firearm. Essentially, or the 4 or 5 skills I made for this. And I was like, those are all the skills you can practice this almost daily, because you're carrying a firearm every day. You can practice safely drawing, unloading it, and then practice, safe, responsible use of force. And then you can also practice tourniquet application at least weekly, as long as proper training equipment is around. So basically my point is that like, you must be practicing these skills the rest of your career. As long as lives are at stake, you must be practicing these skills.
That's amazing, Adam. I really am. I'm sitting here just reflecting on, we've been talking almost 2 hours, and I've heard your story a few times from my husband, throughout the years. You and I have connected once or twice, and I've heard, bits and pieces. And sitting here for a full 2 hours, hearing, the depths of your journey and your experience, and I'm sure there's even more we could go into. And still, from this 2 hours, I'm just noticing, as someone who's never served in the military, who's never been overseas, at the same time, I've had my experiences with different traumas. Of course, few capital T, some lowercase t traumas. I struggled with depression on and off as a kid and through, I had postpartum depression when I had my daughter, here and there as an adult. And I've just been taking in, the experience that you've gone through and thinking, wow, that recovery journey just must have been hell. That must have, as you described it all, like that sounds like hell to have gone through that. Mm-hmm. And then mourning the loss of your brothers and mourning, the loss of, being in the military, being medically retired. You had shared in a previous conversation about wanting to have gone back for special forces training, mm-hmm. and then you didn't get to do that. And I'm just thinking mm-hmm. about, wow, the loss that you've experienced. And also feeling this, and not in because I agree with you completely about, I don't believe in trauma comparison. Like the worst mm-hmm. thing you've gone through doesn't make mm-hmm. the worst thing I've gone through not the worst thing I've ever gone through, right? The worst thing I've ever gone through is still the worst thing I've ever gone through, right? And so I don't believe in trauma comparison. And still, I'm sitting here just feeling inspiration throughout my whole body that that there's always opportunity to turn our pain into purpose, that there's always opportunity to continue serving, that there's always opportunity to keep discovering more of who we really are and the power of resiliency. Mm-hmm. and the power of just your willingness to be candid and to share vulnerably and to share the truth. I'm just so moved by it right now. And I'm so
Thank you.
appreciating that you're willing to share it, and that you can actually rewatch this video of the worst day of your life, I imagine. And that you're
Top 5.
using it. Okay, top 5 worst days of your life. And that you're using this video now to teach others to how to be protectors of life. It is. It's one of the most honorable things I can imagine.
Thank you. Thank you. I was afforded an opportunity to be brave, and I was afforded an opportunity to be a part of a team that I loved and cared for, and meant more to me than I could describe with just a couple words. And I hope that somehow I was able to convey that over this 2 hours. And I was also given a unique situation with that video to, the first time I watched it with my parents, I was sitting between them on my couch at my mom's house, which is, something unbelievable in itself. Both my parents sitting on a couch together with their son has just never happened before. And then we all sat down and watched the raw footage of this medevac. And I think it was 30, 45 minutes of each video, because there was one from the co-pilot, one from the crew chief, and we sat through all of it and watched enough of the timeline to see that you can watch me getting blown up from a distance as they're coming in. You absolutely see me very freshly missing my legs, laying on a litter, gored, missing 25% of my body. And honestly, watching that is horrific, but then you also realize no, I survived that. I shouldn't be mourning this. It's something I survived, it's something that I should share. And there's a really powerful moment in the end of the video when they pull me out of the cabin and they pull my buddy out. The co-pilot looks back into the cabin and there's almost no blood. There's a smudge of blood this big where I was. And it's because those tourniquets were applied so quickly. And it's had we, and we screenshotted that particular part of the video and I put it up at the end of presenting the video. And I'm hey, can anyone tell me what's important about this? And everybody is speechless. And then finally somebody will raise their hand. There's no blood. And they're you had at least two femoral artery bleeds and you were bleeding from your arm, and your buddy had his own injuries and there's barely any blood. And you would just picture it looking like a butcher shop in there, you know what I mean? Or imagine the worst bloody thing you've ever seen. And that was probably worse than what was in that cabin, and it's just a fascinating, powerful teaching tool to have. And I'm glad to have been afforded that opportunity to use that as a teaching tool, because it makes my story, it validates my story, and it is such an incredible teaching tool to have.
Well, I'll leave you with this, Adam, and I'm not sure if I've shared this with you or if you've read any of my husband Adam's blogs, but he started psychedelic healing after Afghanistan fell. And when Afghanistan fell, he'd been doing a lot better with his PTSD through 6 years of counseling. And then Afghanistan fell, our daughter was born, new dad, and then he really got pulled into trying to get interpreters out of Afghanistan. And we still have people he knows stuck there, which breaks my heart to this day. But he was doing all he could to get them out. And it just total resurgence of PTSD. And so that's when he decided to start some MDMA therapy.
Wow.
And his second MDMA session was on May 14th, 2022.
Wow.
And it actually got rescheduled. It was supposed to be a few weeks before and something happened. And then they looked at rescheduling and he was like, yeah, I'll do May 14th. That sounds good.
Yeah.
And,
synchronicity.
Yeah. So he went out there and had a second journey. And he told me about Adam's pretty visual when he has these experiences. And so he went back to that day and said, up until that point, he was angry about it, had a lot of grief, just saw it as such a, he was so angry about the loss of life, about the injuries, the casualties, and just so angry that it had happened to his brothers. And then during that experience, which, MDMA is it's a very heart opening medicine. It removes your judgment, and it shuts down your amygdala, so it kind of shuts down your fear and judgment center for a while. And so having that judgment shut down, he went back to that day and said, and he had the memories of hearing, that Cody passed by running towards men that were injured. He was going to try to save them, and he was killed. Jeff Baker was running towards his men, to try to bring them back, and he was killed. You were running after Jeff when you got hit. And Adam said he, was reliving, hearing about this day. He's seen the video from what I understand as well. And so, was like reliving this day, and that he was overcome with this knowing in his body that he was watching one of the most beautiful demonstrations of love, that day was just all about brothers loving each other and trying to protect each other. And that he developed such a gratitude, and like just his perspective just completely shifted from like anger and and despair into so much gratitude to know about this kind of love. And I still get a little choked up when he talks about this, and and hearing about his shift in that experience, and just for myself knowing there's no greater love than this, that a man laid down his life for his brother. And that's how, at least in our home, we like to honor May 14th now.
Yeah, it's and I don't know if you knew this or not, but that passage from the Bible, I think it's John. I'm not a biblical scholar, but I think it's John 15:13, something like that. But it's actually on Cody's grave. And when we went to visit him, it's like such a powerful thing to see. But all four of those men that died that day could have that on there. And it's so true. And like, while I'm, I do consider myself a Christian, I think that is one of the most important things we can learn from the Bible itself is that love, is that passage, like learning from that example, and having that much love for your fellow man just innately makes you a better person. And even if you don't take all of what's in the Bible, but you should at least take that, and it goes back to what I said before about being a pack member, being a team member, being a part of a tribe, having that love and that loyalty, to not let people down when they need you the most.
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate you being here, your willingness to share a tender story, to share about these men, to share about your experience. And what you said earlier too, I think is also really important for people to know and understand the cost of war, and understanding what we are asking of people and what is happening, because it's so significant. So I just appreciate your willingness to share all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do it. It's I hope more people come forward and share their stories. It's if we don't, somebody else will, and it's better to come from us.
Yeah. Adam gets annoyed all the time when we're watching war movies, and he'll, just kind of get like, oh, that's not how it really happens. That's not how it really is. Oh, they got this wrong. They, like when you mentioned before, it's not a Hollywood blast. Like, yeah, he comments about that all the time. But I will say, as a final plug, maybe, that we did see Warfare a couple months ago, and I thought that movie seemed incredible. And Adam, because obviously I can't speak to it, but said it was the most realistic film he'd ever seen, and like recommends it to everybody.
Well, yeah, my wife and I actually watched it recently, and it's only good because I believe one of the directors was there, or something.
One of the guys, the character Ray is the
yes. And now the only complaint I have as a medic about that movie, and everyone else, I don't think anybody else picks up on it, but do you remember when he tried to put the tourniquet on and he failed?
Yes.
that to me and that to Adam is a no fail skill. Like you do not fail. And again, I know that took place in like 2006 before like we were really hammering tourniquets a
Oh,
lot.
interesting. Okay.
But like in our battalion, you got a tourniquet on and you didn't fail. But again,
Yeah.
I know that the guy still lived in the end. So like, I'm not belittling anything about that, but I think that like, and again, given the time that story happened, it's totally understandable. But like, that's why we practice tourniquets so much. And that's why we practice, the brilliance in basics, master the basics.
Yeah.
Is we practice those tourniquets so much that we don't fail.
Now, is that true for, because I think when he puts the tourniquet on, he's putting it on the medic. So he's not the medic, but he's putting it on the medic. But is that in your mind, is it even if you're not the medic, you do not fail at tourniquets?
I think Adam, being the infantryman there, will know, like, I would expect everybody, around me to know how to do it because I probably trained them myself or somebody I trained them,
Gotcha.
So
gotcha.
like, yeah,
Okay.
tourniquets are our bread and butter. Just as I teach, the sheriff's deputies, like it's a core law enforcement responsibility now. It's if you are a protector of life, if you carry a weapon, you must also carry a tourniquet, know how to use it, And again, those guys were, incredible human beings. It was a different time in the war, much earlier, almost half dozen years before us. Tourniquets were still relatively new at that point, and they weren't practiced as severely as they were when we got in, because I think it was 2010 when I joined, and that's when they were pushing medics to join. And they were really pushing medics to be good at tourniquets and be good at teaching tourniquets. So like, I think there even, honestly, that incident or that attack may have somehow, inspired my training, because it's always lessons learned, that pushes it down the line for the next group of soldiers, next group of warriors.
Well, thank God they were, because that's why you're here.
Absolutely. I stand on the shoulders of giants, like there's so many people that died and sacrificed for the knowledge that we now have. And if there is any silver lining at all from war, it is the advances in trauma medicine, that come from the intense, concentration of traumatic injuries.
Well, thank you again, Adam. This has been beautiful to witness, to get to be here and have this conversation, to witness your experience. And I am so happy to be part of the community because your experience matters here.
Thank you. And thanks for listening, and thanks for having me, and thank you for sharing our stories, and thank you for being such a wonderful part of your husband's team. That means a lot to me that you care. I mean, we are a team as well because you love him so much. Anybody that loves Adam is part of my pack.
Oh, I love that. Well, I'm honored to be in the pack. Thanks, Adam.
Yep. Thank you.